So to begin this timeline, we have to start with some background information about the Clair Obscur universe. So in the real world of Clair Obscur, there exist people that possess magical powers that allow them to project themselves into art that they create, called painters. The creations that they paint can be given sentience within the worlds that they create. These worlds created by painters are referred to as canvases. Painters are also able to project their consciousness directly into canvases and interact with the creations living there. This process leaves their real body immobile, and some form of time dilation occurs within canvases when compared to the real world, as days or even years within canvases do not seem to pass as much time comparatively in the real world. It's mentioned that being inside a canvas for an extended period of time can cause harm to a painter, and in extreme cases can even be fatal. Poetically, when painters create canvases, they literally leave pieces of their souls in the worlds that they create. Painters perform their craft using a magical energy called chroma, and chroma is basically the fuel for all of a painter's magical actions both outside and inside of a canvas. Painters are also capable of erasing painted creations or even entire canvases from existence. Additionally, painters of sufficient skill can alter or paint over the paintings of other painters, effectively overwriting someone else's creation. So from the perspective of the beings within the canvases, painters are basically creator as well as destroyer gods. There are two worlds where events take place throughout the course of the Clair Obscur timeline: Verso's canvas and the world that the Sandra family lives in, which appears to be an alternate 19th century France, specifically Paris, as we see the Eiffel Tower in Epilogue Elysia. I will be referring to the world of Verso's canvas as the painted world, and outside as the real world to clarify between the two. So at some point in the real world at an unknown date, two painters named Aline and Renoir marry and start a family together, the de Sandra family. Aline and Renoir paint many canvases together over the course of their marriage and have 3 children: Clair, Verso, and Elysia. Aline is described as the more powerful painter between her and Renoir, as Renoir stated that Aline was the one who taught him how to use his powers responsibly. Aline is also mentioned to be the head of the Painters Council, but details on what exactly that is are not given. They also teach all 3 of their children how to use their powers, with Clair having the best talent for painting amongst the 3 children. At some point during his childhood, Verso, with help from Clair, paints a canvas containing many different fantasy creatures. These creatures are several of the non-human beings that we see throughout the duration of the game. This includes Gestrels, Grandis, Esquier, which is a recreation of one of Verso's toys, Francois, who was possibly created by Clair, as well as gestural representations of their family dogs, Minoko and Noko. They spend a lot of time there playing with their creations and exploring the world they have painted. Renoir and Aline also occasionally go into Verso's canvas with them and enjoy their time there together as a family. However, as Verso gets older, he realizes that his true passion is not in painting, but in music. He gradually shifts his focus to studying how to play the piano and does not paint any more canvases. Now, on December 33rd, 1905, in the real world, a fire breaks out in the de Sandra mansion. It's stated that the fire started because Elysia was deceived by a group known as the Writers, who seem to be in opposition to the Painters. Details on the Writers and their powers are not given, but from how they are mentioned, they are likely people with powers like painters, but instead of painting their creations, they write them into existence. It's also not said whether all the people in the real world of Clair Obscur have these types of powers, or whether the painters and writers are a small subset of the population. Additionally, details of what exactly transpired between Elysia and the writers are not given. Verso sacrifices himself to save Elysia during this fire, but she is gravely wounded as well, suffering burns on her face as well as losing her right eye and her ability to speak. Verso's death gravely affects the de Sandra family. Aline, stricken with grief, becomes more distant with Renoir and begins harboring resentment towards Elysia. Aline is unable to bear the grief of losing her son, but knows that the canvas he created contains a part of his soul, which is represented by the small faceless boy we see throughout the game. She decides to project herself into Verso's canvas in an effort to be closer to him. After entering, she paints a copy of Paris she calls Lumiere, as well as painted copies of her family and other new humans to populate the city she's created. Specifically, she paints this version of Elysia to still have her scars from the fire, as she blames Elysia for Verso's death in the real world. From here on out, I will refer to the versions of the de Sandras that were painted by Aline with the title Painted. Aline and her painted family live in Lumiere for some time. I should also mention, while the exact time it began is not specified, at some point between now and before Expedition Zero, Painted Clair develops a romantic relationship with a man named Simon. Also, Painted Verso becomes close with a woman named Julie. While their exact relationship isn't ever clearly stated, it's implied that if they were not in a romantic relationship, Painted Verso at least held feelings for Julie. Aline lives within the canvas for some time, which begins to affect her health, but she refuses to leave. Realizing she will eventually die if she doesn't leave the canvas, Renoir decides to enter the canvas to forcibly remove Aline and then erase the canvas so Aline will no longer be able to enter it. Renoir then enters and tries to force Aline out of the canvas, which includes the creation of the Axons to assist him, which are giant beings with large amounts of chroma that represent his family. Their conflict results in the continent of the canvas being fractured. Lumiere is split in two, with a portion being formed into an island away from the rest of the continent. This event is referred to in the future as the Fracture, and the portion of Lumiere remaining on the continent from then on is referred to as Old Lumiere. This is also when the monolith is formed, and time within the canvas begins being marked by monolith years. The conflict results in Aline being imprisoned within the top of the monolith, becoming the Paintress, and Renoir being imprisoned beneath the monolith, becoming the Curator. A barrier is formed around the monolith that instantly erases any beings that try to cross it. The Painted Descendres do not know the truth of these events and just think Aline went missing after the fracture. In the real world during this time, Clair wants both of her parents out of the canvas as she wants to take revenge on the writers for Verso's death and wants their help. She enters Verso's canvas shortly after Renoir. As Aline is the stronger painter, Clair decides to assist Renoir by creating beings known as Nevrons to kill Aline's human creations in the canvas. When a Nevron kills a human, they trap that human's chroma within their body instead of allowing the chroma to return to Aline. With Aline's powers slowly diminishing, Renoir uses his powers to erase her oldest creations within the canvas, starting with those 100 years or older. Aline, being unable to stop this, uses the Paintress avatar to paint a number on the monolith to warn her creations about their impending erasure every year. This yearly event where people of the age on the monolith or older are erased is later named the Gommage. The Axons made by Renoir, now without their creator, settle into their own parts of the continent. The humans of Lumiere, unaware of the true nature of what is happening, assume incorrectly that the Paintress is the one causing the Gommage and become determined to stop her. I will now be referring to the events in the monolith year that they occur in. Monolith year 100. Back in Lumiere, the citizens start organizing a search and rescue effort to the continent to try and locate people who were displaced by the fracture. This first ever mission to the continent is called Expedition Zero. Painted Renoir and Painted Verso join this expedition as they want to find Aline, with Painted Renoir being appointed as the commander. Simon, Painted Clair's lover, also joins. Expedition Zero then departs for the continent. At some point during this year, Clair kidnaps Painted Clair. Whether or not she did this from Lumiere or if Painted Clair was displaced by the fracture and was found by Clair is not specified. Clair, disliking Aline's creation modeled after her, decides to paint over Painted Clair. This process removes Painted Clair's free will, and Clair imbues her with the ability to create Nevrons. Clair then seals Painted Clair within a place called the Flying Manor, where she endlessly creates Nevrons to assist Renoir. During Expedition Zero's journey through the continent, Simon at one point is separated from the rest of Expedition Zero. He meets Clair, who impersonates Painted Clair and imbues him with enormous power. She directs him to go to the monolith and defeat the Paintress, as this would remove Aline from the canvas, as Clair wants. Since Simon thinks Clair is actually Painted Clair, he believes her, and with his newfound power, Simon kills the Axon that resides in Old Lumiere. You can see the corpse of this Axon, as well as Simon's sword, scattered around the area on the world map in the game. Then, using the chroma from the Axon, he is able to bypass the barrier and enter the monolith. He meets Aline and learns the truth of the world from her, and that Renoir is actually the one causing the Gommage. Aline also tells Simon that defeating Renoir would save Painted Clair. With this information, Simon agrees to fight against Renoir, and with Aline's assistance, Simon descends the monolith to confront Renoir. However, Renoir is too powerful for Simon to defeat, and his mind and body break, now stuck in the bottom of the monolith. Meanwhile, Painted Verso, Painted Renoir, and the rest of Expedition Zero make it to the monolith at a different time than Simon does. At the barrier, they meet Clair, who is waiting for them. Clair then tells Painted Verso and Painted Renoir the truth about themselves and their world, that they are the creations of Aline and Verso respectively, and that Aline has become the Paintress after the fracture, which was caused by the real world Renoir. She also further explains painters and how their powers work. After revealing the truth, Clair attempts to destroy Expedition Zero. However, she is unsuccessful as both Painted Renoir and Painted Verso have been made immortal by Aline. None of Aline's painted family can be killed, die from old age, or be erased by the Gommage. The rest of Expedition Zero does not survive Clair's attack. Painted Verso and Painted Renoir both then return to Lumiere. Between Expedition Zero and Monolith Year 84. Upon returning to Lumiere, Painted Verso and Painted Renoir both try to explain to the rest of the people that the Paintress is the one trying to protect them from the Gommage. However, no one believes them and they are treated with suspicion since they are the only survivors of Expedition Zero and were not wounded in any way due to their immortality. A battle later happens where Julie witnesses Verso getting mortally wounded, but later finds him healed, which reveals his immortal healing ability. This convinces her that Verso is lying to her. One night, she along with several other people ambush Painted Verso, abduct him, and interrogate him, suspecting him of being a traitor. Painted Verso and Painted Renoir are forced to kill Julie and their group. They then flee Lumiere with Painted Alicia and begin living on the continent. Hey, so this is me in post after recording all of that stuff, and I wanted to comment on the previous section here. When I was recording, the information I used for that previous section on Julie came from her journal entry in which she refers to Expedition Zero kind of in the third person, almost as if she's not on Expedition Zero, because in her journal entry she's referring to Verso and Expedition Zero as if she's not part of it. But as I'm grabbing clips for this video and I see the clip that shows Verso killing Julie and her group, I noticed that Julie is actually wearing the Expedition Zero armband. So maybe she was on Expedition Zero, or maybe she was part of a later group because they were all like search and rescue at that time. So they just all got the armband, but she was in a different group or something. I'm not really sure on that one because her journal entry makes it sound like she wasn't a part of Expedition Zero, but then she's wearing the Expedition Zero armband. So I don't know. This is a passion project and I'm trying to make this as accurate as I can, but I truly don't know what the correct answer is on that one, so that one's up in the air. All right, back to the timeline. After leaving Lumiere, Painted Renoir decides to protect the Paintress and by extension preserve the world of the canvas for as long as possible. For this goal, he resolves to kill expeditioners, which will return the chroma in the humans he kills to Aline. Painted Verso initially goes along with this plan, but later decides against it. Growing tired of the conflict, Painted Verso decides to walk away from his family and goes on adventures around the continent for several decades. It's during this time that he meets Esquier and Monoko and forms a bond with them, both of whom are aware of the true nature of the world as they were created by Verso and not Aline. No further expeditions are sent to the continent until Monolith Year 84. Monolith Year 84. Expeditions are re-established. Expedition 84 plans to follow in the footsteps of Expedition Zero, but they inevitably fail. Monolith Year 60. The Gigachads of Expedition 60, believing only in the true power of muscles, are able to reach the monolith. Having no clothing or equipment and relying solely on the power of their sculpted bodies, they are able to pierce the barrier surrounding the monolith. They then learn the truth of the world and attempt to swim back to Lumiere to let everyone know the reality of their world. Unfortunately, they are unable to make it back before their Gommage. I'm sorry, you can hear me laughing in the recording. It was hard for me to talk about the Chad expedition without laughing. I just wanted to say really quick, that whole expedition, them sliding that into the game, that just felt so anime. They're really showing how this game was inspired by like Final Fantasy and JRPGs and stuff, busting through using nothing but their muscles. That just feels so anime. It's really showing why France is the second largest market in the world for anime and manga other than Japan itself. Just wanted to comment. All right, back to the timeline. Monolith Year 58. While Expedition 58 is journeying through the continent, they are joined by Painted Verso. He travels with them for some time, and together they discover the Painted Descendres family manor in Old Lumiere. Expedition 58 also discover that Painted Verso is Painted Renoir's son, and record that in their journal. Unfortunately, Expedition 58 is eventually wiped out by Painted Renoir. Monolith Year 49. In the real world, Clair decides to leave the canvas, as she wants to focus her energy on fighting the writers responsible for Verso's death. She asks Alicia, who is still recovering from the fire, to go into the canvas to help Renoir get Aline out so they can both assist Clair in her war against the writers. Alicia agrees, but before entering the canvas, Alicia hides it so Aline will not be able to re-enter if she is removed. Clair admits that while this is a smart move, she believes Aline will still be able to eventually find the canvas. Alicia then enters the canvas. However, she is not able to properly control her chroma and is overwhelmed by Aline's chroma. This results in her being repainted into the world of the canvas without her memories. She is then reborn in Lumiere as Maëlle. For simplicity, I'll be referring to Alicia as Maëlle up to a certain point. Clair then briefly re-enters the canvas and informs Painted Verso of Alicia's new identity and asks him to keep an eye on her. Painted Verso agrees and periodically returns to Lumiere over the course of Mael's life to ensure her safety. Between Monolith Year 49 and 33. By this point, Lumiere's culture has shifted as the lifespan of the humans has decreased so much. Children begin apprenticeships as early as age 6 and begin families as early as 15. Mael's parents are gommaged in year 46 and she is orphaned. She spends the next several years shifting between various foster families. During this time is when other main characters from the game become adults: Gustave, Lune, and Ciel. Gustave becomes an engineer and works on improving the infrastructure of Lumiere. He also begins developing a device known as the Lumina Converter, with help from Lune, who is also a scientist. Lune and Ciel meet on the first day of Monolith Year 45 after the gommage. This is when Ciel's father is gommaged, and Lune learns that her parents' expedition, Expedition 46, failed to stop the Paintress. They bond over their shared grief, but afterwards Lune cuts Ciel out of her life in order to focus on expedition research. During this time is when several of the relationships of the main characters change as well. Gustave begins a romantic relationship with a woman named Sophie, who is also friends with Ciel. All three of them work together on a project called Aqua Farm 3, which is likely an agricultural development project. However, Gustave and Sophie's relationship ends in year 37 as they disagree on wanting children in a world that's very likely doomed. This is also the time frame in which Mael comes under the guardianship of Gustave and his sister Emma. Gustave forms a strong brotherly and fatherly bond with Mael and also takes on several apprentices amongst Lumiere's orphans to ensure his knowledge is kept after his gommage. Monolith Year 33. We now reach the events of the game. By this point, most of the citizens of Lumiere have begun to lose hope that the expeditions will succeed. Expeditions now have vastly fewer volunteers, with the bulk of the people being those with only a year until their gommage. Gustave finally completes a device known as the Lumina Converter, which allows expeditioners to harness the chroma in Pictos and convert them into Lumina. On the day of the gommage, Gustave and Sophie reaffirm their feelings for one another before Sophie and everyone else her age is gommaged. Expedition 33 is formed and departs for the continent. Mael, now 16 and still missing her memories as Alicia, joins this expedition, despite her gommage being 9 years away, as she desires to explore the world. As Expedition 33 arrives on the continent, they are immediately intercepted by Painted Renoir and Nevrons, who wipe out most of the expedition. Mael is pulled off the beach by Painted Verso, and is left in the care of the Curator, which is a weakened projected avatar of Renoir. Other than Mael, only Gustave, Lune, and Ciel survive the attack, and are separated from each other. Gustave and Lune first reunite, and later find Mael with the Curator, who joins them on their journey by improving their Pictos, items, and weapons. They later reunite with Ciel at the Gestrel village, who was brought there by Gestrels who found her. They also recruit Esquier to assist them with crossing the ocean to reach the monolith. During this time, Mael begins having visions of her previous life, and interacts with Painted Renoir and Painted Alicia. Painted Renoir, knowing Mael is actually Alicia, warns her to return to Lumiere. Mael, not knowing the true meaning behind Painted Renoir's words, continues with the expedition. As they are journeying, Painted Renoir confronts the party and kills Gustave, devastating Mael.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
This is observed by Painted Verso, who allows Gustave to be killed, as he is afraid Mael will not assist him in erasing the canvas if Gustave is alive due to her attachment to him. Mael, after interacting with Painted Renoir's chroma, has a vision of her parents arguing, but she does not understand as she is still missing her previous life's memories. Painted Renoir attempts to remove Mael from the canvas, but is stopped by Painted Verso. The rest of the party escapes with Esquier and is later found by Painted Verso. He reveals to Expedition 33 that he and Renoir are from Expedition 0 and that they are both immortal, but he does not give any further details and pretends to be unaware of the reason he is immortal. By this point, Painted Verso has grown tired of being at the center of the conflict in Verso's canvas and wants to be unpainted. He also desires to protect Aline and knows that she will die if she does not leave the canvas and wants to help her. Painted Verso then joins Expedition 33 and they begin their journey to Minoko's station to recruit Minoko. Along the way, they stop at the Forgotten Battlefield to bury Gustave.
We could never tell if you were my brother or my father, but to me you were both. The best brother and father I've ever had.
They arrive at Minoko's station and recruit Minoko, who, as mentioned previously, is aware of the true nature of the world and that Mael is actually Alicia. The group then travel to Old Lumiere to destroy the Paintress heart, which will allow them to bypass the barrier surrounding the monolith. As they travel through Old Lumiere, they are separated briefly into two groups. Ciel, Lune, and Minoko run into the corpse of the Axon that was killed by Simon. Lune finds the journal from Expedition 58 and finds out that Painted Verso is Painted Renoir's son. Meanwhile, Mael and Painted Verso arrive at the Painted Descendres manor, and Painted Verso attempts to enter it using Mael, but is stopped by Painted Renoir. The rest of the expedition reunite with Painted Verso and Mael and battle Painted Renoir. However, Painted Renoir escapes with the manor and the heart, killing Noko in the process. Their original plan of failure, the group then decides to kill two of the Axons and use their chroma to create a weapon capable of piercing the monolith barrier. They succeed in defeating the Axons, and the Curator uses their chroma to create the barrier breaker weapon. Before traveling to the monolith, Painted Verso is visited by Painted Alicia, who gives him a letter to give to Mael. Painted Renoir also briefly appears and speaks to Painted Verso about his decision to help erase the canvas. The team then enters the monolith. While climbing the monolith, they see visions of the experiences of the real-world Descendres being manifested by Aline's chroma. Mael also begins to have vague recollections of her memories as Alicia. They are also again confronted by Painted Renoir. After a battle, the Curator, with help from Mael, erases Painted Renoir. The team then climb the monolith and confront the Paintress, being revealed as Painted Verso's mother. Aline's mind by this point has deteriorated due to her extended time in the canvas. She is unable to remember that Painted Verso is not the real Verso, and is also unable to recognize Mael as Alicia. After a lengthy battle, Expedition 33 defeats the Paintress, which also expels Aline from Verso's canvas. The team then returns to Lumiere on Esquier to report their victory. While Painted Verso reads the letter Painted Alicia wanted to give Mael, Renoir is released from the monolith. Renoir then erases all of the humans in the canvas other than Painted Verso, along with Mael. This causes Mael's memories as Alicia to resurface and merge with Mael's. I will now return to referring to her as Alicia. Alicia then confronts Renoir and begs him not to erase the canvas, as she now views it as her home. Renoir, being unwilling to risk Alicia losing herself in the canvas, refuses to allow her to stay. Painted Verso and Alicia then escape on Esquier with Minoko, with Alicia also gathering Ciel and Lune's chroma. After escaping, Alicia uses their chroma to repaint them into existence. Alicia promises to repaint everyone once she has control over the canvas's chroma and Renoir is out of the canvas. The team then prepares for a final confrontation with Renoir. Alicia uses the trapped chroma within the corpses of humans killed by Nevrons to partially resurrect them. These expeditioners help join in the fight against Renoir. I should note that before confronting Renoir, or after if you do post-game, there is optional content in the game that concludes some of the story arcs for some of the characters. Firstly, the team can climb the Reacher Axon to meet Painted Alicia, who requests to be unpainted by Alicia. Alicia then unpaints Painted Alicia. The team can also find Painted Clair at the Flying Manor, and after a battle, Painted Clair unpaints herself. The team can also descend into the part of the monolith where Renoir was trapped to confront Simon. After defeating him, Simon gives Painted Verso his sword. The team then goes to confront Renoir in Lumiere. With help from the resurrected expeditioners, the team is able to reach Renoir where they begin to battle him. team is slowly overwhelmed by Renoir's powers, but Aline briefly re-enters the canvas and helps them defeat Renoir. After the battle, Alicia tries once again to convince Renoir to not erase the canvas. Renoir then shows the team a vision of Aline suffering from being inside of the canvas for too long, which shocks Painted Verso. Alicia then finally convinces Renoir to leave the canvas, telling him she will only stay for a short while and will join him shortly. Renoir then leaves the canvas. However, Painted Verso can tell that Alicia is lying, and she intends to live and die within the canvas, just as Aline intended to. Unwilling to allow that to happen, Painted Verso resolves to destroy the canvas himself by making the part of Verso's soul within the canvas stop painting. Alicia then attempts to stop him, as she believes that she will have a better life within the canvas than outside of it. This triggers a choice in the game where you can either reach Painted Verso's ending or Alicia's ending. If Alicia is chosen, after defeating Painted Verso, she rebuilds Lumiere and repaints all of its people, including Gustave, Sophie, and Ciel's husband Pierre. She additionally repaints Verso as well, though he is clearly shown to be unhappy with his existence. Alicia decides to live in the canvas permanently, and the story ends with her showing signs of the same condition Aline did. If Painted Verso is chosen, Alicia is expelled from the canvas and Painted Verso stops the piece of Verso's soul. This destroys Verso's canvas and everything in it, including all the members of Expedition 33. Sometime later in the real world, the Descendres are shown mourning and coming to terms with Verso's death, with Alicia remembering the friends she made within the canvas.